Hydrogen is explosive, extremely volatile, and reacts with metal. To compress it, you need high pressures of up to 700 bar, and to liquefy it, you have to cool it down to minus 253 degrees Celsius. It seems to me that transporting it is a real technical challenge. I'm an optimist, but honestly, we have to talk about what we really need to do to create the hydrogen infrastructure required. Hello and welcome once again to our new episode of minus 253 degrees Celsius. It's our monthly expert talk that gets to the point, the boiling point of hydrogen. And today we're really happy to have a strategy expert from Bosch. It's Martin Eberle. And we're going to discuss how we can transport the hydrogen we'll need in the future from production to consumers. Martin, it's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
First question, tough one, straight off the bat. Could you give me a rough personal estimate how much of the infrastructure we'll need by 2050? Actually, how much do we already have that today?
There's almost nothing there today. So we have, just to put it in perspective, about 3.2 million kilometers of natural gas networks and only 5,000 kilometers for hydrogen pipelines today. So almost everything will need to be built.
Okay, but you mentioned the gas pipelines. What about the idea of distributing the hydrogen through the existing gas pipeline network?
That's an idea which many are picking up on in those countries which have an existing natural gas pipeline, which is especially in Central Europe. One of those European things is the European hydrogen backbone, where they're now getting ready to moving from ideas to actual plans and investments. Yeah, it's possible to convert most of those pipelines. However, compressors, seals, and some fittings need to be adapted.
Okay, so is it actually a big conversion project?
In parts. So pipeline transport is the cheapest way in general to transport gases as well as hydrogen. Especially in Europe, but also in some other countries, there is quite some natural gas infrastructure in terms of pipelines. So it will, of course, make sense to use this existing infrastructure and repurpose it. So in that sense, yes, it can be a reconversion project. Of course, there are also other ways of transportation, like shipping via truck, which is also done today. And there it's less of a conversion.
Now, many people dream of simply putting a mixture with a lot of hydrogen into the networks instead of pure natural gas and using it in their end devices like the gas turbines, their stoves or their heaters. What do you think about that?
I think it's an interesting idea at the beginning. The idea generally goes, well, if I have green hydrogen, which is produced with renewable electricity, the carbon intensity goes down if I inject a little bit into an existing gas network. However, you only can do this blending, as it's called, between 10, 20, in some projects maybe also 30% without changing the facilities which are using it. And it's always depending on the weakest point in this whole supply chain from production, injection of hydrogen or gas until the end user. And in the end, it will be a question whether it's economic or feasible, because for the foreseeable future, hydrogen will be more expensive than natural gas.
So you'd say it's a good concept, but not necessarily economically viable. However, you do mention 30%, that number there, and I've heard that number related to some reports from a pilot project, the Hydrogen Island in Öringen. So they said they attained a 30% mixture already. Yeah. That sounds quite positive, actually, doesn't it?
It sounds good. And the question is, will it be scalable? And does it make sense both from a carbon reduction standpoint? Does it reduce carbon enough compared to other possibilities? And is it possible to roll it out to other use cases or other larger areas?
Okay, but it does sound positive, and that is music to my ears, because it sounds like a solution that could have an impact in the medium term.
Again, it depends on the scale we are looking at. It could have an impact in the medium term, but the question will be, how quick will we be with hydrogen production? And how quick will other things be, like electrification of certain use cases? And in the end, again, economics.
Now, I learn in every episode there are a lot of building blocks, many components that we need to consider for our energy future. Let's get back to transportation. What are the building blocks and components that we need for the transportation on ships, trucks, or storage in cabins?
Maybe let's go 3 steps. First, pipelines, then ships and trucks. What are the differences and what are the key components? So first of all, pipelines. It's supposedly the easiest one because you just take H2 and use H2 at the very end. So in between it stays H2, and it's just about putting a lot of pressure in, to move it through the pipeline. And that's a bit more difficult than methane. With regards to ships, there are two ways of going about it. Either liquefying hydrogen, which is pretty energy intensive, and we talked about the 253 degrees minus, which are necessary for that. This requires quite some energy, but then it's possible to use it on ships and transport it long ways. Whether it's economical, we don't know. It's not commercial yet. The other way is to turn it into other kind of fuels. Methane, synmethane, or methanol, or ammonia. All these are possible. Some of those aspects are already commercial today. Others are not yet. They might be a better route than using pure liquid hydrogen for ship transport. And then there's trucks. It's already used today. Here it's more likely to use either as liquid or as gas, but with a lot of pressure, which you mentioned in the beginning. Yeah? So this is what's being used today for points. However, you need a lot of truckloads if you want to compare it with other energies. That's the point with regards to comparing it to efficiency in economics. Just to give you an example, if you have one truck today of diesel, to transport the same amount of energy, you would need 18 trucks of H2 tube trailers. So there are all these trade-offs you need to consider.
Okay, we've talked about a lot of topics, but I'm still a bit concerned because there seems to be a lot of uncertainty and we only have a fraction of the necessary infrastructure so far.
I wouldn't be worried too much about it, honestly. There is still some time to go to 2050. It's not very long in my perspective because infrastructure takes also long for planning and building. But the next few years will be there to shape this, and that's why it's so exciting. And most likely, many of the mentioned ways of transportation will be visible in 2050. So it will always come together between where's the hydrogen coming from, how long is the distance to be transported, what will be the end use, will it be pure hydrogen or will it be a derivative, and how is all the other aspects in the energy transition moving ahead. How much will be electrified, what other modes will there be, and where's being what produced in the end.
Thanks, Martin, for your answers today. You've kept my optimism up to a good level, and I'm really excited to hear about the hydrogen infrastructure progressing. And thanks to everyone for joining us for the minus 253 degrees Celsius. It's our monthly expert talk that gets to the point, the boiling point of hydrogen. And we'll see you next time.